Thank you. It's pretty amazing how all of our emotions are actually expressed through sound. The applause that you have for appreciation. When you're happy, when you have that moment of pride. When you're sad. When you want to think about something. It's interesting because sound is quite invisible. And our relationship with sound actually starts at a very young age. In fact, we're born with just two kinds of fears. The fear of loud sound and the fear of falling. Of course, or the gravity check. You might want to call it that way. So everything else around us that we hear is conditioned. Every single fear is conditioned. Every single emotion is conditioned that we have to go through. And what's also interesting is your mind actually captures in all information at the same time. But also then it decides to zone out of it. It likes to detach itself out of it. And once it detaches itself out of it, it seeks change. And that change is the information that you feed to it, wherein it actually looks to see what is the next thing that's going to happen. Now, in my talk today, in the next few minutes, we'll be talking a bit about technology. We'll probably be having a bit of entertainment. And I'll also take you through a bit of the design aspects of this as well. Let's talk about the mind first. Now, I want you to cover your ears. And I will be counting up all the way from 1 to 5. And after 5, when I reach 6, I'll open my hand. When I open my hand, I want you to open your ears slowly. Are you ready? Is everything around you louder now? Can you hear the sound of those lights? You can hear your shuffle. You can hear the one person that's moving over there. You can hear your feet on the ground. You can hear everything. We just went from hearing to silence to listening. My name is Sreejesh Nair. I'm an application specialist and a film mixing engineer. Let's look at something else now. Belief. We've always heard the term that seeing is believing, right? And that's the fun part of it, because once you see, it's easy to believe. When you don't see and it's invisible, it's not about just not believing it, it's about every single person will have his or her opinion on that fact. And that is exactly why sound is extremely subjective. What is it about sound that is actually quite interesting? Now, there's something that you should also understand when it comes to this sound. This sound is actually very direct. It's the exact sound that you would have as the watch is on your hand. And if you're anybody like me who hates to wake up in the mornings, God bless you. Right? This is the last sound that you want to hear. And the reason for that is it's first person. It's happening to you. That's also what happens in cinema. You can take the audience through a journey of going through the entire emotion and then pushing them back to taking a back seat and watching the action happening before plunging them in. So this is first person, if you think about it. It's third person. It's interesting, right? You feel so relaxed that the alarm is in the next room. Right? But this is also what happens in third person. And this is also what extremely good storytellers do. They take you through a journey with the actor, they take you out of it, they take you with the character, they take you out of it. It builds a whole set of dynamics in it. But that's not where sound ends. What is sound design? People ask me, what do you do? Do you dub? I don't dub. Do you make music? No, I don't make music. Do you do sound effects? No, I don't make sound effects. What do you do? Well, I take everything of this and I mix it up. And the next question was, do they pay you for that? We took the watch. We add a bit of room to it. It goes into the next room. We add a bit of reverb that's reversed from it. You have something that's leading into the watch. We extend that sound. It becomes longer. From this, we extract the core frequency, which is a 4K tone. You will hear that one tone that's there. From that one tone, you add a bit of reverb to it, and of course, the much cliched shimmer. Under the shimmer, you start a bit of rain, if that is there. A very comfortable sound of rain. And as you take off that, you continue the high frequency with the cricket, so that you don't get lost in it. Slowly fading it out, bringing your mind very much ease, a lot of peace, a lot of calm. Right, now that we're all awake, right, so now that we have our adrenaline running, that brings me to my next point, which is dynamic range. This is the technology part that I was going to say. And this is also very important for you to understand. Our ears are capable of hearing such a huge extent of sound. So if I were to put this in context, so the human hearing range is 120 dBs. There used to be a thing called a cassette player, for which you needed a pencil, which is very important. So the CD player has a dynamic range of around 96 dBs. Now, what's it with all of these numbers? Why are these numbers? Why am I throwing you these numbers? We have a T portion in TED. Well, it's not about that. It's not about that. What does this actually mean? So if I were to put this whole thing of the whole range of human hearing in context, you have Mount Everest, that is there, and that's the comparison of the height of Mount Everest with a mosquito. Oh, you can't see the mosquito. Yeah, that's right there. Yeah. Let's just be real. Mount Everest is 8,848 meters high, and a mosquito is 1.4 centimeters. There's a reason that I want to talk about dynamic range, and that's actually a very real issue that we face today. There is something, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, it's called a loudness war. What loudness war means that everyone wants to be the loudest. Apparently, the loudest is the best. Except when you skip dinner and your mom finds out, right? So there is a very active loudness war. What happens in loudness war is, if you think about it, that's Mount Everest, and yeah, somewhere around there is a mosquito. The average between that would be kind of average loudness in your thing. So what happens is when people mix, and the only way to make it loud is obviously to scale up the mosquito. If you go and watch films in cinema, I have never come across a single person complaining that the sound is low. Because if you do, trust me, he works in the sound industry. Sound is always perceived to be quite loud. And it becomes loud. At some cinemas, some films are ridiculous. We don't need that much loudness. Because at this point, my footstep is louder than my voice. Unless, of course, I am the Hulk, which makes sense. But no, so what happens here? Well, the next logical step that the theater people will do is this. They would reduce the volume. So what happens when the volume is reduced? Well, you end up with a mosquito the size of Godzilla and a Mount Everest the size of an antpit. Neither of which makes sense. This is exactly what happens when you listen to good music. It is very important you understand what good is. And the only way you can understand what good is by listening to what bad is as well. It's always a comparison. That is very important for you to understand. Now, why am I saying about all of this? These peaks, these highs and lows is actually what gives life to everything. We're not a perfect race. We don't like anything that's perfect. Except, of course, if it's in your maths class and you're asked to draw a straight line. That's a different thing. But we're not a perfect race. We like those little mistakes that make it more human, more analog, more us. This brings me to the next thing, which is a bit about clarity. Now, the next piece that I'm going to play is actually the recording done by Ganesh, Saji, and Krishna Chandran. It's the recording of a band that was done outdoor. And I'll have a question for you all after these two pieces. This is the first one. That's the first one. I have a question. Which one do you feel is more clear? Sample A or sample B? Raise your hands for sample A. Raise your hands for sample B. And for the rest of us, I've finished counting 5 before. That was in the beginning. You can take your hands out of your ears. So if you look around, you would have seen that sample B is actually felt to be a bit more clearer than sample A. And the reason for that was sample B, but here's also something you should understand. Sample B had less low frequencies than sample A. Sample A had less high frequencies than sample B. All that we mean by clarity is the high frequency. If you take your fingers, and you do this next to your ear, you would hear a lot of detailing, a lot of clarity. And as you do that, if you take it off, it just vanishes off, doesn't it? That is what we call detailing. And a lot of these detailing works that happens in cinema is done by artists called Foley Artists. They're the ones who, when the actor walks, when he has his shirt on, when he puts his jacket, when he sits, the whole movement of the leather seats, they're all done by a separate group of people called Foley Artists. And that's what brings detailing into cinema. When you have more detailing, you feel as if you're part of the film itself. And that is the most important thing you need to go back with. It's about the expression. It's about being with the cinema. There's another technique that we use in this whole thing. Again, all of these are techniques, all of these are like amazing tricks that we use in this. And the next one relies on something that is to do with your memory. I'm going to play the same recording. It'll have 3 elements in it. You'll have to tell me which one you felt is brighter. Which one did you think? How many of you for 1? How many of you for 3? How many of you for 2? Oh, that was a trick question. So here's what is interesting. 1 and 3 are exactly the same. Your mind does not have a tonal memory beyond 3 seconds. Yeah, so don't blame yourself for not getting marks. Now, this is also something that's very interesting as well, because all of this resides with this one little factor. We're talking about sound, but a lot of sound actually happens in your mind. And there's also a very interesting experiment that, this is the next part of E we're going to do. So there's this very interesting experiment that you can do, and even if you're watching it on the screen, you can do that as well. So what I want you to do is extend your right hand in this way. Please take care of the person beside you. Yeah, I should have said that before. Yeah? Extend your right hand like a fist. Extend your thumb, which is what you should be doing on Facebook. Extend your index finger. This is that classic pose when who ate the cookies and you have a sibling. Make a circle with your thumb and your index finger. Make a circle. Very good. Now touch it to your chin. That's your cheek. It doesn't help changing in the last minute. This whole thing was actually first demonstrated by a guy called Philip Goldstein, or he's a very well-known mentalist who goes by the name of Max Maven. Now I'll tell you why this works. You don't have to follow me with this. So listen to what I said. I said, extend your hand, extend your thumb, extend your index finger, make a circle with your index finger and your thumb, touch it to your chin. You expected something else to happen after that. So I remember, I told you that your mind will go into a zone when it doesn't have any changes. This is exactly what happened. Your mind went into a zone. It was expecting something else because every sentence of mine ended in an upper pitch. I was going up. So you expect to have more information after that. This is also something that's interesting when you speak. There's a very well-known technique of continuing your conversation. And for The ones among us who are like me and who find it very difficult to continue conversations, just repeat the last 3 words they said. Trust me, that's the best thing. It'll make you a very good listener. It'll make you a very good conversationalist. So the reason I talk about this is because it's also important to know about placement of sound. All of these things that actually happen has to do with where sound comes from. For example, cinema sound started with 1 speaker in the center, then you had 2 on the left and right. Then they decided to add 1 speaker for the surround. So you had left, center, right, and a surround. There was 4 channels. Then they decided to split the surrounds into your left surround and your right surround. Then they decided to split that again into your left back, left side, and right side. And now you have other immersive formats where you can actually address every individual speaker in the room. Not only on the sides, you have it on top. You have 2 layers. There are formats with 2 layers, size, overhead. It's incredible. And all of this to bring a very realistic experience for the person sitting right there. It's all about you. It's all about you. It's all about how you get into the whole act of cinema. Are you enjoying it? Are you part of the character? Now, there is also something that's very important in this whole thing. It's not just about good placement of sound. It's also about the whole fact of, is this the right sound? Is this the right level? There's a very different one that goes in the same lines as this. You start to hear sounds that you heard before. You start to hear the rains. There's a very specific placement of all of these sounds, and it's all subliminal. It's all a reminder of things that happened to you sometime in the past. We can't predict the future. We can remember the past. And all of this, along with placement, along with determining where the frequencies are, along with treating your memories, along with taking you on a journey with this, along with that small sound that is there somewhere in the distance. I know what you're waiting for. It's called conditioning. It's not going to happen. Because now, you're already in a heightened state. I don't need to do anything as a sound artist. There is another art form that is very close to this. It'll amaze you. It'll mesmerize you. It has to be invisible. And when done right, it's astounding. It's called magic. So, as a good sound artist, are we magicians? Probably not. But we definitely are illusionists. And so is every single one of you. Thank you so much for hearing me out. It's been wonderful talking to you.